Good evening again, everyone. My name is Isabel Molina, and I am the public programs producer here at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust. I'm very pleased to welcome you to today's book talk for Plunder and Survival, Stories of Theft, Loss, Recovery, and Migration of Nazi Uprooted Art. Here at the museum, we are dedicated to the crucial mission of educating our diverse community about Jewish life and heritage before, during, and after the Holocaust. As part of that mission, our programs illuminate the stories of survivors, broader histories of hate and anti-Semitism, stories of resistance against injustice, and more. Thank you again for joining us today virtually. We hope that if you're able to, you will visit the museum in person to see our current and upcoming exhibitions, including Art of Freedom, the life and work of Arthur Szyk, which opened recently on December 7th, 2025. As I mentioned, closed captions are available on today's program, and instructions on how to turn those on or off are posted in the chat. If you have questions for our speakers during the program, please put them in the Zoom Q&A box, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the hour. Again, that's the Zoom Q&A box and not the chat. Now, today we are honored to be joined by Suzanne Loebl and Abigail Wilentz. Suzanne Loebl is the author of 14 books, most recently America's Medicis, the Rockefellers and their Astonishing Cultural Legacy. She was born into an art collecting family in Germany and escaped the Nazis as a teenager by hiding in Belgium. Her other books include America's Art Museums, A Traveler's Guide to the Great Collections, Large and Small, and a memoir on her experience during World War II, At the Mercy of Strangers, Growing Up on the Edge of the Holocaust. In 2012, she received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Society of Journalists and Authors. Abigail Wilentz has developed books on art, design, photography, fashion, lifestyle, and other topics as an editor at Universe Publishing, a division of Rizzoli International Publications, a Watson Guptill Publications, and independently with agents and authors. She has written several books commissioned by publishers and directed a custom publishing line for the luxury fashion brand Brioni. Thank you again for joining us, and now I'm going to hand things over to Suzanne and Abigail.
Good evening, everyone. Suzanne Loebl and I thank you for joining our discussion on our recent publication, Plunder and Survival. The book takes a new look at Hitler's assault on art and its consequences, which include a shift of the art world center from Europe to America. The book collects a multitude of stories, so we can only touch upon a few of those today, but we hope that this will entice you to read further. Since World War II, public attitudes toward looted art and restitution have come a long way. So Suzanne wants to start with a few words about that topic.
Hello, and thank you for sharing your evening with us. Before the end of World War II, a tiny unit of the U.S. Army known as the Monument Men discovered salt mines in Austria and Germany where the Nazis stored masses of stolen artworks, gold, jewelry, and other treasures. The world gasped when Van Eyck's Magic Ghent altar place, Michelangelo's Madonna of Bruges, and thousands of other art treasures emerged. The monument returned much of this art to the countries where it had been looted. But in the following decades, restitution continued at a very slow pace, and the public paid little attention to plundered art until the end of the 20th century. Methods changed during the 1990s with the publication of great books on the art Holocaust and the successful conclusion of some restitution cases, most notably that of Gustav Klimt's portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer to her niece Maria Ortmann. At the turn of the millennium, 44 nations signed the Washington Principles that promised a more equitable handling of looted art.
Suzanne, before you delve into the book itself, why don't you start by telling us a bit about yourself?
I was born into a comfortable German Jewish family in Hanover. Both my grandparents had followed Jewish religious law, but my parents assimilated. For my mother, as for some other German Jews, art had replaced religion. My mother was a very talented amateur artist. She attended art exhibitions and lectures. She was an enthusiastic member of the Kushner Society, Hanover's Modern Art Association. Art was important to my family. When I was 5 years old, we moved into a big Victorian house, and Mom began filling it with pictures, huge cacti, and other wonderful things. I really kept her company. Joseph Abo, a well-known Jewish sculptor born in Israel, moved into our house and modeled my father's head. Abo was a native of Palestine. His talent became recognized during his challenge, and he received scholarships to study art, to go to school first in Jerusalem and later on in Berlin, Germany. Our pleasant life in Hanover did not last. The Nazis assumed power in 1933, and Jews became second-class citizens. My life remained pleasant, though I experienced quite a bit of anti-Semitism. In 1938, we emigrated to adjoining Belgium. I blossomed in Brussels, learned French, and loved my school. But we had not moved far enough. In 1940, the Nazis invaded Belgium, Holland, and France. My family tried to escape to France but failed. From 1942 to 1944, we hid in plain sight. I lived with 4 different Belgian families working as a nanny. Here you see me. Okay. I remember these years as being filled with fear, boredom, impatience, sadness, and ordinary life. The Germans left Belgium in 1944, but it took until 1946 until we joined my father, who had already managed to emigrate to America. Once in New York, I learned English, completed my chemistry studies at Columbia University, worked as a lab technician, got married, had 2 children. While bringing them up, I decided to change profession and became a science writer. In 1968, I published my first book, Fighting the Unseen, the story of viruses. Plunder and Survival is my 15th book. It was a very exciting life.
So, what was it that made you decide to write Plunder and Survival?
The topic just fit my interest. I was very young when the Nazis became part of my life, but they dominated and determined it. I had lived through all of World War II. I knew lots about art. I had written about both, and but before actually writing Plunder and Survival, I had to sort out and face my feelings about my German childhood and the years that I had spent in Belgium hiding for dear life. A major change in my attitude to all this German influence occurred in early 1970 on a visit to the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. I wandered into a tiny prayer room dating from 1735, whose wooden walls were covered with magic images of stylized flowers, like folk art. The wall label explained that the small jewel came from Horb in Franconia and arrived in Israel in 1968. A family genealogy confirmed that 3 generations of my family, including my great grandmother Adelaide, worshipped in the sanctuary. Reluctantly, I realized that Germany is part of my personality and that a fraction of Germany's past belonged to me. It, however, took me many years to feel neutral about my birthland and not to cringe at being taken for German. I actively started working on the book in 2018. Once started books, you have the ways of growing. This one turned out to be very personal, and writing it became a labor of love.
Suzanne, what did you want to accomplish by writing this book?
I wanted to honor the victims of the largest art theft ever, and also mourn the people and the art that perished, celebrate the art that survived, and pay tribute to those who did their best to mitigate the honor. Also wanted to honor those who didn't make it. Take Felix Nussbaum, for example. He was a gifted artist who hid in Brussels and chronicled the Holocaust. He was detained in the same camp in which my Saint-Cyprien, in which my father stayed for about a year in the south of France. He was denounced and a couple of months before the end of the war and perished. This painting is now in the Neue Galerie in New York.
Suzanne, can you tell us why art was so important to Hitler and the Nazi establishment?
When he was very young, Hitler tried to enter the Austrian Art Academy. He failed the entrance exam twice. For years, he made a meager living painting and selling postcards. When he unexpectedly became Germany's chancellor, he saw to it that art would play an important role in his fiefdom. These Führer's artistic tastes ran to sugary genre scenes. He also hated what he considered to be un-German art, characterized by unnatural colors, distortion, unrealistic perspective, flat roof, and other signs of decadence. Um, he- um, Here is a cow by Franz Marc, one of the founders of Expressionism, and you see she is very happy and she's yellow instead of white and black. Today, she is um, at the Guggenheim Museum in New York. Museum, um, the Nazis passed decrees that expressionist artists could no longer paint, practice their métier, and they really had to do something else. And museum directors who had bought many expressionist paintings were fired from their museum.
This is a good
Paradoxically, the German expressionists returned the country to the forefront of artistic greatness. Today, the names of Ernst Ludwig, Kirchner, Franz Marc, Wassily Kandinsky, Max Beckmann, and many others are well known, but then they had to fight for recognition.
We should explain now the basic execution of Hitler's war on art. It falls into two basic overlapping sections. First, the elimination of degenerate art from Germany's museums. Hitler appointed Adolf Ziegler, one of his favorite artists, to oversee this task. On June 30th, 1937, Ziegler began confiscating 20,000 pieces of degenerate artwork from Germany's museums. 4,000 of these pieces were burnt, and the rest restored with the intent of selling them later, selling them abroad, that is, as they were not allowed to sell them within Germany. Kurt Valentin, a German Jewish art dealer who had already moved to New York City but kept his German connections, sold more than 600 of these works to American clients. One of those clients was the Museum of Modern Art, which bought several pieces. The second part of this attack on art was the confiscation of artwork belonging to both major and minor Jewish collectors, art dealers, and other individuals considered shall we say, less than by the Nazis. They looted an estimated 650,000 items this way. These pieces were widely dispersed, and they periodically pop up today. In addition to these two areas of attack, art was leaving Europe with refugees, artists, art dealers, and collectors who escaped the Third Reich legally, bringing their own possessions with them. It's impossible to calculate the number of works that migrated this way, but now many of these pieces belong to American museums. Two good examples of such migrated art are the Tannhauser collection and which belongs to the Guggenheim Museum now, and the Fisher collection, which is now part of the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. The story of the Tannhauser collection begins with Heinrich Tannhauser, who founded a modern art gallery in Munich in 1909. The gallery promoted early modern French and German art and loaned several works to the 1913 Armory Show in New York City. That show is what introduced modern European art to American audiences and often shocked them, but that's another story. Heinrich's son, Justin, took over his father's gallery after World War I and went on to build a collection of French modernist works of his own. He expanded the business to Berlin, Lucerne, and Paris, which allowed him to move his collection out of Germany once the Nazis took over. Then in 1940, he emigrated with his collection to New York. With no heirs of his own, he decided to gift 75 works from his private collection to the Guggenheim in 1963. We have one image, which I will share now, from the Tannhäuser collection. Coming up, here we go. This is Picasso's Woman Ironing, painted in 1904 from Picasso's Blue period. Justin Tannhäuser maintained a lifelong relationship with Picasso, and the collection includes more than 30 of the artist's works. Regarding the Fischer collection, the second example of migrated art, Ludwig and Rosie Fischer were early advocates of German Expressionism and formed their collection in Frankfurt, buying paintings from dealer Ludwig Schames or sometimes the artists themselves. The Fischer's son Ernst, a medical professor, brought half of his parents' collection with him when he emigrated to Richmond, Virginia in 1934, when he was taking a position at the Medical College of Virginia. Much later, after his death, his widow Anne made an agreement with the museum in Virginia that they would eventually obtain their collection. Their collection at that point was consisting of 200 works. Finally, they did acquire that collection in 2009, and it's one of the most important collections of German Expressionism in the United States. We have one image from that collection here as well, which is E.L. Kirchner's Six Dancers. The Fischers collected many works by Kirchner, so this is one of many. Ooh, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. This is one of many in the museum in Virginia's collection. I actually just read last week that another Kirchner, a 1918 watercolor, was restituted to the Fischers and donated to the museum just last year in 2025. So this collection continues to grow. Let me get out of this. Before going further, though, we should bring up Hitler's visit to Austria and why this was so important to the story of Nazi plundered art. Suzanne, when did the Nazis move from Germany into Austria?
In March 1938, the Austrians welcomed the German Nazis with open arms. The streets were lined with people brandishing flags with swastika. On his way to Vienna, Hitler stopped in Brunau, his birthplace, to lay wreaths on his parents' tombs. The reception of the Austrian people clearly moved him, and it's perhaps then that he began planning a giant art museum to be located in nearby Linz. From then on, the so-called Führer Museum occupied Hitler's thoughts. The project became such a passion that the architectural model of the museum accompanied him to the bunker where he died in 1945. By the end of the war, Hitler had assembled 5,000 to 12,000 artworks. Other Nazi officials emulated their leader in collecting art. Hermann Göring's collection was estimated at 4,000 items, 1,376 of which are carefully documented in a handwritten catalogue.
It's estimated that 1 million artworks were displaced during the Nazi era. How did you choose which stories to include in the book?
There were so many uh, meaningful stories uh, that it was difficult to decide which ones to leave out. I tried to concentrate on less familiar events. For instance, I reviewed the activities of the four German modern art dealers, Karl Buchholz, Bernhard Böhmer, Ferdinand Möller, and the best known Hildebrand Görlich, who were appointed to sell the 16,000 degenerate artworks confiscated from German museums. The sale, whose revenues were disappointed, ended during the summer of 1941. But Hildebrandt Görlich continued working for Hitler, ruthlessly assembling the collection for the Führer Museum and assembling also his private art collection. After the war, Görlich concealed his enormous collection and sold items as needed to cover living expenses. More than 1,400 items passed to his heir, his reclusive son Cornelius, who continued to conceal it until challenged by a tax collector in 2012. The world was shocked, and Hildebrand took his place among war criminals. Cornelius left his collection to the Museum of Bern in Switzerland. Another story that I like particularly is that of Kurt Feldhauser, a Nazi art historian living in Berlin. Though he was a Nazi, and it was strictly forbidden to buy confiscated degenerate art within Germany, Feldhauser formed a small collection of important works by Chagall and Kirchner. Incidentally, he bought them from Möller, which was one of the salesmen of that Führer had hired to sell all the paintings he had gotten from the museum. One of the paintings, Kirchner died during an Allied bombing in Germany, and his mother, Marie Louise, inherited his paintings. After the war, she moved to the US to join another child, and she sold Kurt's collection. And one of my favorite paintings that she sold is Ernst Ludwig Kirchner's self-portrait as a soldier. It was bought by a small museum, the Allen Memorial Museum in Ohio. And please note that Kirchner, the self-portrait, his hand is severed, and this was figuratively representing that the war and the cruelty prevented him from painting.
Tell us, what are some of your favorite parts of the book?
Oh, I'm particularly fond of chapter 8, which is called Artists in Exile. Goodbye Europe, Hello America, which describes the exodus of refugees from Europe. I identify with them because my family in Belgium was also constantly figuring out ways of escaping the Nazi death machine. I have a great liking for Varian Fry, the shy representative of the American Emergency Rescue Committee. He was sent to France to help with the escape of 200 selected artists and intellectuals. In Marseille, Fry bonded with Hiram Bingham IV, the U.S. Vice Consul in Marseille, who expected to ration visas for America. Through their ingenuity and falsifying exile visas and other records, the two men saved more than 2,000 desperate refugees. One of these was Max Ernst, the surrealist painter. Fry had supplied him with a fake French exit visa, but customs officials stopped him as he was trying to enter Spain. Um, Before Ernst could board the return train to France, the official asked him what on earth he had in his overstuffed backpack. Uh, Ernst unpacked it, and it was filled with his paintings, and he spread them on the station platform. Everybody gasped. The official and the other passengers. The stunned official declared that though he did not like Ernst's paintings, he adored talent. And he pointed at the two trains in the station and said, "One goes back to France and the other one continues to Spain. Don't take the wrong train." Ernst chose the train to go to Spain and ultimately to one of the seats on Peggy Guggenheim's Pan Am Clipper going to America. Here you see the painting. It's Europe after the rain, which the people in France admired. Another one of the people saved by Varian Fry was Marc Chagall, who was also stuck in southern France. He was unconcerned about his future because he said that he was too famous to be killed by the Germans. Fortunately, Varian Fry convinced him to not trust the Germans, and Chagall continued on to New York. He didn't have enough money for his ticket, and people passed the hat in New York and to pay for his ticket. Chagall was accompanied by crates weighing 1,300 pounds stuffed full of his paintings. Yeah. Okay. Okay, I think that's all what we have time for now. I think we want to leave plenty of time for questions, and I hope you have some. And I enjoyed talking to you.
First, that the book, Plunder and Survival, is widely available at bookstores and online. And also that Suzanne publishes a free newsletter on Substack if you'd like to learn more about looted and migrated art. I believe the address for that is going to be available through Isabel, and she has a website as well. So, aside from that, we can move on to questions.
Great. Well, first, thank you both for such a wonderful presentation. And yes, if you missed it earlier, I just put those links in the chat for you, where you can purchase the book and also subscribe to Suzanne's free newsletter as well. So we'll move on to questions. We already have some great ones from the audience, but just a reminder, if while we're talking you're inspired with other questions, definitely feel free to put them into the Q&A, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. But I think this first one is a nice way to kick us off. One of our viewers is wondering how you two first got connected, and if you could talk a little bit more about how you two collaborated to make this
Sure,
book happen.
sure, sure.
Well, I mean, I needed help, and so I approached Abigail, and she um, picked out all my mistakes and and did some additional research, and it took many years, and I think she got very enthusiastic about the subject, and it took a long time to put this book together, and you might notice that there are two tables in the book, and one of them gives small biographies of the principal um, people in the book, and the other one is a very interesting one. I wanted to call attention to that there are lots of looted artworks in small museums throughout America. And quite a few of these, I think 50 or 75, are listed in a table. And you can see those and visit them. And you also can click onto the table, and then you can see the picture.
Yep, in
Okay.
the digital edition, if you have that book, in the
Yeah.
ebook.
Yeah, I guess that is on the e-edition only, right?
Yes, that's right. It
Yeah,
Mhm.
is
yeah,
the ebook. But yes, but
yeah.
no, but that's an interesting feature because I think, yeah, a lot of people don't realize how many of these artworks have been spread out all over the country. And most people wouldn't know that these looted works are sort of hidden throughout collections in both large and small museums. Yeah. But I was going to say actually one other thing that we wouldn't have met if it hadn't been for Suzanne's agent, um, whose name is Regina Ryan. I think she's in the audience. Um, and she actually put us together so that we could start working on the book and bringing together. Suzanne had so many ideas, but we needed to really pull it together into a larger book, and it took a long time to do fact checking and form it into something that was where we can approach a publisher with that. Um, it's a long development process. So, but it was thanks to our agent that we met.
Well, thank you both for sharing a little bit of that background. We have a few similar questions, sort of about the whole process of researching and writing the book. Um, so the next one is someone is wondering, really for the two of you, one, how much of this history of looted and migrated art were you aware of before you started this process? And if there was anything that you learned while writing the book that really surprised or shocked you that you weren't expecting.
Oh, a lot. Yeah, it was. very interesting. I mean, yes, everything led to something else, But what was surprising to me was how many personal relationships I discovered. I mean, one of the first art art dealers that I uh, wrote about is Ludwig Schammers, who started selling art expressionist art in Berlin, and he happened to be the grandfather of a cousin of mine, pretty close cousin of mine, and um, and then my husband was a professor of chemistry, and we had a sabbatical, and we met a young man there, and his name is Lionel Salam, and it was a long time, it was in 1960, and when I researched looted art in France, it turned out that the grandfather of Lionel Salem
Salem,
had
yes.
really a major collection, which was sort of um, sold in France. So that was, sort of more and more people really. Uh, we had personal relations to it.
Yeah, there were so
But
many
I
coincidences.
came, I spent a lot of time at the Frick Collection, which is New York's most neglected art uh, g- library. And they had the most esoteric books. They had biographies on all the sales men that Hitler enjoyed. And so it was really, I couldn't stop. I could go on writing this book for many more years. And oh, and then I found this story about Max Ernst in a very unrelated biography, and then Abigail found more on him. So, it grew and it grew. I mean, she found, actually a biography by Ernst's wife which also he told that amazing story of him having an exhibit in the railroad station of Pau in
Yes.
France.
But there is so much unexpected that it makes you want to keep digging further and further. You couldn't A lot of it you couldn't possibly even imagine
Yeah.
actually happened. And there's also a lot of really awful things that happened, obviously, that we do talk about in the book, and just the amount of stealing um and just there are obviously terrible things that happen to the people too. It's such an attack on the people as well as the art itself. It goes deeper. So these are very personal stories as well. So I feel like we started to feel so attached to these people, even though we're not connected to them, although Suzanne was connected to some of them.
Well, thank you for sharing. We have another question that's similar, but takes a slightly different route. And the question is for both of you. An audience member mentioned that, you're both writers, you've done similar work before, and they mentioned that, Suzanne, you said this felt a little bit more personal than some of your other work. And they're wondering if both of you could just talk a little bit about if and how the process of writing this book differed from some of the work that you had done previously on other subjects.
That's hard. I mean, every project is completely unique. So I always dive in and try to start fresh. But I've worked on a lot of really widely ranging subjects, many kinds of nonfiction, many genres, I mean, everything, travel, food, biography, fashion. I mean, I've been all over the place. But this one felt especially meaningful. It just felt, much deeper and richer than a lot that I've worked on. And I did feel that there was so much here that was important that we really had to be extremely responsible about what we were saying, and that and I felt that it was a very special project, and that this was an important project, and I know that it was important, Suzanne, to this get this down on paper, although it's not all on paper anymore these days. um, and it was important to bring all these stories together and make sure that a lot of these people weren't forgotten, because a lot of these stories, as she had mentioned to me, were she had found in newspaper articles, or old obituaries that had been in some in some publication that wasn't permanent. So we just wanted to bring them together in a permanent way. And also, we wanted it to be illustrated. It was important to her to have it, um, have some images there so that it felt um, like a somewhat of a reference as well. But today, in today's publishing, it's very hard. You can't have all the art. It would be nice, but that it's just too expensive. Um, but at least we had some, so that was special. Um, but yeah, no, I felt really honored to be a part of the project. So, but perhaps, yeah, Suzanne can say she's coming from a little different perspective, because this was so close to her background. And actually, one thing I thought maybe Suzanne might want to talk about a little is the fact that there was looted art in your family too. Maybe you might want to say something about your uncle, who had a special collection, and that was, you don't, it might be worth mentioning. So,
Okay, well, I felt a responsibility to record the story of somebody like Nussbaum, the man
yeah.
who was in prison, and who can easily be forgotten. And so that was one of the things I wanted to do, in this book,
Hmm.
record some of those stories. And then it turned out to be very personal for me. I had to think more about Germany than I usually did, and that some things really were very important to my parents. I mean, to be that involved with Germany, and how terrible it was for all that generation to be kicked out of a country they really loved, for many. I didn't, I really didn't. It was very special to discover that little synagogue in Israel. Oh, yeah, I mean, and it was it I had to really dig into it more, and all these very special things that meant to me, which meant things to me. So that was very important. And mostly I I was a story keeper. It was very hard, and it was really difficult to put the book together as a story, because it's really
Right.
a collection of many little stories, and I got very attached to all these people. I mean, this family in France, or and I learned so much.
We really, I think, put a lot of detail, even in chapter one, about your family's background, that's actually one of my favorite chapters. So I think people will enjoy reading that as well, even
Yeah.
if that was hard for you to write. I know we urged you to, pull more details out, but it's a very
Yeah,
evocative chapter about
yeah,
what was
yeah,
happening before the war and your own
yeah,
memories of that, which is really
yeah.
nice.
Right. Well, we have one more in particular for you, Suzanne, especially because you mentioned, your deep personal connection to it. But one of our audience members is wondering, if there are any lessons in the book that you would hope readers would take away from it, or anything you hope they would learn from these stories that you've put together.
Yes, well, that's really, it, in fact, well, it's, yes, I mean, I think I contributed to the history of American Art Museum. This is just one chapter of how all these amazing small museums were put together. I mean, before this book, I wrote a book called America's Art Museum, and that came about in a very special way. I was working as a science writer for the Arthritis Foundation, and we traveled around America, a lot. And when we had some time off, my colleagues went to see the sports event, and and I went to the art museum, and I couldn't believe all those small art museums that existed in small towns like Ohio, Toledo, Ohio, and San Diego, and the pictures were mostly donated by American citizens, and some of them rich, some of them, and I wanted to uh, tell my little story. I mean, that this was, many pictures came from this particular horror, which was, which I refer to as Hitler's art Holocaust. So that's what I wanted to do, to call attention to these small museums. I mean, the story of how the American museums were founded on the American frontier. The people came in, they said, "Oh, we have to found a museum," and so that was my little contribution to art history.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. We have another question that is directed at the both of you, and it's a little bit more lighthearted. Someone wants to know, of all the artworks that you discussed this evening, if there is one that stands out to you as either a favorite or one that has been, particularly impactful or meaningful for either
Yeah.
of you.
Wow.
Mm.
I know it's a hard question.
Yeah. Suzanne, is there,
Well,
yeah, what do you think?
yes, it's a painting that I actually own. I didn't put it. It's Paolo and Francesca, and it was in my family. And the man was not very. The painter wasn't very, very famous, and would have never been. But it's a very beautiful painting, and
We should note this is in the book, not in what we showed today. So,
yeah,
so
what?
just explaining to the audience, this is in the book itself,
Yeah,
not in the paintings we showed today.
yeah, no, it's not. It's not. It's in the book, and so yeah, no, that's my favorite. I mean, I might almost say that, I could. I wrote the book because of that painting. I wanted to showcase it.
Oh,
The poor man died in a concentration camp, and this is a very handsome picture, and so I gave it some, exposure.
yes.
So,
No, it's a wonderful thing that that's in the book.
yeah,
I love that one too. I really do. But
yeah,
of the ones tonight though, that yeah, that's hard. I mean, I think you'd have to look at them closer, but What one that I really do love actually is the yellow cow,
Yeah,
which is it's such a joyous painting, and um, if you read more about it, which I started doing, of course, because I liked it so much, there are so many meanings attributed to it. I mean, one that I actually read was, I mean, who knows if this is really true, but they said that it was possibly a depiction of him and his wife. It was like a marriage. It was a picture of their marriage, which it was very, in a conceptual way, but meaning because he always painted animals as a sort of, in a very spiritual way, and he also loved he had different colors attributed to different emotions, and so there's a whole language that Mark uses with these beautiful bright colors and animals, and you really have to look into it. So it looks like just a playful childish image, but it's not. There's so much going on there. um, but that is part of the Tannhauser collection. I don't know if it's on view right now. I know I looked for it at one point and it wasn't there, so I'll have to go check that out. So, anyway.
Well, thank you both for sharing. We're almost at time, so I think we have time for one last question. And I think this one is a nice one to end the evening with. We have someone who is wondering for both of you, what's next, and if there are any books or projects that you're working on, or if not, they might just have to stay tuned and see for themselves.
yeah. Oh,
Oh my goodness. What's Suzanne?
yeah.
Book of essays. What is Suzanne?
Well, I have a book which I did. It's actually almost complete, which is a collection of essays. It's called Flowers Along Life's Rugged Path or some such, thing. And it's stories about, little things that happened to me. It's in personal essays, and I think I'll return to that.
Well,
Um,
um, I'm actually working. I'm not actually writing anything else right now. I'm working with a few authors, helping them on their books, which is what I often do, and helping them with their book proposals. And I actually there's about three of them right now that I have to get going on in different nonfiction. But one is World War II related. It's another very personal story of his family's businesses in Germany. So that one is a little bit connected. So I'm hoping that finds a publisher.
Well, thank you both for sharing, and it sounds like you're both very busy, which I know, so I really appreciate you both taking the time to come and present this evening. We are at time, so unfortunately that will be the last of the questions. So apologies to our audience members if we didn't get to your question. But before we leave, I would just like to take a moment to thank you both, Suzanne and Abigail, for coming and speaking to us this evening. And of course, a big thank you to our wonderful audience for joining us. I would like to remind everyone that you can purchase Plunder and Survival at the link in the chat, which I highly encourage everyone to do. Also, if you enjoyed today's program, we hope you'll consider making a donation to support the museum, which you can do at mjhnyc.org/support. We also hope to see you all at our upcoming programs, which you can learn more about at mjhnyc.org/current events. Both of those links are in the chat for you as well. Thank you again for joining us. We hope that you have a great night and that we'll see you soon. Thank you.